2 responding officers attempted to speak with Mr. Williams, who were standing at the top of the stairs near the front door of Unit 2557. Officers asked if he lived there, but he did not respond. Williams then lunged toward the officer with a knife as the 2 descended the stairs, causing the officer to stumble and fall to the ground. In response, the officer's partner fired 1 shot at Mr. Williams, who then ran away towards the lower level of the unit, the knife still in his hand. It was unclear at that time whether Williams had been struck by the officer's gunfire. 4 backup officers arrived on scene a short time later. Meanwhile, Mr. Williams climbed onto the roof of the unit, later breaking a window and retreating inside the home through that window. He then barricaded the front door with an ottoman. Sergeant Perry, a supervising officer, then arrived on scene. He approached the unit with 2 other officers, announced he was a police officer, and repeatedly asked Mr. Williams to open the door, advising that if he didn't open the door, the officers would have to force entry. Williams told the officers he was defending his property, although when asked if he lived there, he never responded. Officers attempted to force entry, but were blocked by the barricaded door. Mr. Williams would not allow them in and would not drop the knife, which was still in his hand as he shoved the ottoman against the door. Sergeant Perry and his team of officers asked Williams to put down the knife approximately 5 times before Williams approached the now partially open door with the knife in his hand, prompting Sergeant Perry to fire his weapon once. Approximately 20 more times after firing that shot, which did not appear at that time to strike Mr. Williams, Sergeant Perry asked Mr. Williams to drop his weapon. After realizing that Williams would not surrender, Sergeant Perry and another officer attempted once more to force their way inside the residence. Williams then leaned towards the slightly open door with the weapon in his hand. Sergeant Perry then fired 3 shots towards the residence. Williams then closed the door. After discharging his firearm this time, Sergeant Perry ordered all officers on scene to back up and hold the perimeter. A SWAT team was then called, and they arrived in about 40 minutes to assess the home and assess the threat. Mr. Williams was discovered unresponsive and pronounced dead at the scene. Subsequent interviews with the medical examiner indicated that even immediate resuscitation efforts would not have saved Mr. Williams' life because of the extent of the injuries he sustained from his gunshot wounds. Immediately following the incident, the GBI was called in to investigate. Their findings were turned over to our office for review for further investigation. After an exhaustive review of the facts, evidence, circumstances, relevant law, policies, and training protocols associated with this matter, I have reached my decision. These cases are never easy, and every loss of life is a tragedy. However, not every loss of life is a crime. I must review these matters and make only one determination: were any laws broken by the actions of the officers involved? We have concluded that there is no criminal culpability in connection with this case. The use of force was justified under Georgia law. As such, no charges will be filed against Sergeant Perry or any other responding officers. This case is now closed and will not be presented to a grand jury for prosecution consideration. Our charging determination is guided by the criminal statutes regarding the use of deadly force and justification, the DeKalb County Police Department's training policies regarding use of force, and the evidence produced by the extensive body camera footage worn at all elements of this encounter. Georgia law allows a law enforcement officer, or any citizen for that matter, to use deadly force to protect him or herself or a third party if there is reasonable belief that the officer or another party is in fear of receiving serious bodily injury or death. Sergeant Perry indicated that he feared Williams was attempting to stab him and his fellow officers with the weapon he had been repeatedly ordered to put down. Furthermore, Sergeant Perry was aware that less than an hour before arriving on scene, Williams had lunged at another officer with this same weapon, with arguably the same intent. Sergeant Perry's fear of serious bodily harm was reasonable under the standard of law. While we have determined that there was no criminal wrongdoing in the use of force associated in this matter, it is no less a tragedy or heartbreaking. A life has been lost, and for that, we extend our deepest condolences to Mr. Williams' family, with whom we met today to share our findings and charging determination. We appreciate their patience and persistence in seeking answers and a resolution regarding the death of their loved one. We have spared no resource in thoroughly investigating this case so that we too could be certain that every measure had been exhausted in an effort to make an appropriate charging decision. I have said before that the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office should be a standard bearer for prosecution offices and for our community for doing what is right without fail, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. I stand by that philosophy today. While this is not the conclusion that Mr. Williams' family was seeking, it is the appropriate resolution under the law. Thank you for your time, and I will open up the floor now for any questions.
Yeah, you met with the family for almost 2 hours. Can you tell us what was discussed over the length of that time period?
Well, what I can tell you is we put together a fairly lengthy presentation discussing the facts, the evidence, the body cameras, the 911 calls, the statements of all the witnesses, and then we also presented the law and told them the conclusions we'd come to, and then gave them an opportunity to ask any and all questions that they felt like they needed clarification on.
Were they open to that, or how did they react to what you showed to them?
While the family was obviously disappointed with the decision I made, they asked very cogent and pressing questions of myself and the team members that were assigned to this case. And we made all of efforts to make sure that we could address all of the questions that they had today.
What brought you to the conclusion to your decision?
After a review of all the evidence and the facts and the law, the body cameras, the 911 videos, and reviewing all the circumstances, we found that the use of force in this case was justified under the law.
All the officers are back to work right now, back on duty?
That's a question for Chief Ramos. I am not sure of the status of the officers involved in this case.
How important is body camera now? It seems like we're so used to seeing it, but how does it help?
Well, I think it's a tremendous help, both for members of the community as well as law enforcement. It's an additional aid and tool that we use not alone, but we use that in conjunction with witness statements, with eyewitness testimony, with the physical evidence that we collect from the scene. But it has become a crucial piece of evidence, and I think that, as in this case, the body camera was released very early on. The family had access. It was released to the media well in advance of us coming to this conclusion. So I think we can all agree that seeing that footage can oftentimes make a difference in at least tamping down any emotions while we get through our investigation.
And I apologize, someone asked this before, but do you have any message for the family?
I do. I mean, I met with the family on 2 occasions. Once when this incident first occurred, and then obviously today, and then my team met with the family an additional time. And what I said to Zadok's mother, Chris, today was that I was extremely sorry for the loss of her son. And to his sisters, I said that I know I can't make you whole today. I can't do the one thing that you would like to have, which is your brother and your son back in your lives. But that what I had to do was follow the law, the facts, and the evidence, which is what I told them I would do when we first met. And although we can't agree on the outcome, I feel like the family understood that I did my job and I did it fairly and I did it impartially, even if they don't agree with the decision that ultimately I came to.
How do you make the decision to not even bring it to the grand jury? Is it, like, where's that breaking point?
There is no breaking point. When I was elected district attorney in 2000 and took office January 1st of 2017, I made the decision that I would not use the civil grand jury to evaluate officer-involved cases. In my mind, if we are going to present a case to the criminal grand jury and ask for charges, then we need to be able to make sure we can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. So since January 1 of 2017, we have handled every officer-involved case in this same way. Myself and a team of lawyers in my office review those cases. We make the decision, and then we present those cases that we feel we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt where there was criminal liability to the grand jury, and then, of course, the grand jury ultimately makes the decision on whether we can proceed with those charges.
So in this case, the facts of the case didn't even get to the point of going to a grand jury?
Correct, because I do not believe that under the law that there was a crime committed here. Justification allows the officers to use the force that they used in this case, which did ultimately end in the tragic loss of life of Zadok Williams.
The family says that they don't believe that this is the end. They're going to continue to promote mental health awareness and do what they can on their part. What's your response to that?
I absolutely support them in that endeavor. I mean, I think this is one of just many cases where we're talking about mental health and the criminal justice system. And to the extent that this family can use their experience to promote how we engage with people with mental health issues, how we continue to support them, and how we help them get what they need to avoid any violent situations, they have my full and total and complete support. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if there's any follow-up questions, I'll be happy to make some stuff up.